Hello and welcome. This is the Fit for Privacy podcast, the podcast for professionals. I'm your host Punit Bhatia. In this podcast, we talk to influencers so that you get to listen and learn from their experiences and thoughts. Remember, this is not legal advice, and if you need one, please contact a professional with your situation. So let's get started. Hello and welcome. Today in the Fit for Privacy podcast, we have a guest who has been a DPO for 11 years. He's an expert in data protection and he can talk about info security, ISO 27001, and even penetration testing. He has worked in multiple industries like pharma, healthcare, and even financial services. And now he has his own consultancy firm wherein he focuses on the process and people part of data protection or privacy. And his consultancy and his business won New Business of the Year's award. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Richard Merrygold from iStorm Solutions UK. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you very much.
So thanks for being here. And if you can explain us your story about how did you get into privacy?
Yep, of course. So about 11 years ago now, I was working for a private healthcare company who specialized in diagnostic imaging, so MRI, PET, CT scans, and they delivered a large number of contracts for the NHS at the time. So there was a lot of governance required around the patient information that came into the business. There was an opportunity that arose during my time there to be an assistant to the information governance manager or the information governance officer, and it just sounded like something interesting. I thought I'll see if I'll go for that and see how it goes. And to be honest, it went from there, and I've never changed career since.
Good. And then in the same company you became DPO or later on?
So I stayed with the healthcare company for about 3 years from that point. So I went from being the assistant to the information governance officer to the information governance manager. And then there was a round of redundancies, and things changed a bit, and I was fortunately offered a job with a pharmaceutical company. So I went to be their information governance and DPO. And then from there I moved into financial services. So I worked in financial services for about 6 years as director of group data protection as well. So is that sort of just transition through industries, but yeah, always sticking to the same type of role.
Good. And you specify in your company that you focus on people and process aspect of it. So how does that work, and how does that differentiate from the regular, if I may call it, consultancies which are there?
So I think the odd thing for us, or I suppose the difference in the way that we approach things, is that when I first started in this sort of industry and in this career, there were no tools, there was no software, there were no solutions in place for anyone to use. So everything that you wanted to be done relied on people. It relied on good communications. It relied on relationships. Explaining the benefits to the business of getting the things done in the right way. And all through my career, one of the challenges that I've always come across is, how do you sell data protection to somebody? how do you sell the benefits of that concept to a business, and how do you get that buy-in? And that's what our ethos is about. So our business and our consultancy and our approach is about bringing people on, bringing companies on the journey, getting people engaged, because if you haven't got that, and you haven't got that cultural understanding, and people don't understand the why, then you're just never get the work done.
Indeed, and I think even after so many years, it does remain a people and process aspect. Though there are a few tools now, but it's you still need the people and process aspect of the data protection in place before you can plug in the tools.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Good. So, if I may ask, how would you describe GDPR in one word?
Well, one word that doesn't offend anybody. Um, Transparency is
Mm-hmm.
probably the single word for me that encompasses the regs.
Mm-hmm.
It frustrates a lot of people, I think, and lots of people would struggle to understand the purpose of the regulation and the purpose of why it was brought out. But at its heart, it was brought out to make companies be more transparent. So if
Right.
there's one word to describe it, for me, it is transparency.
Sure. I like the way you phrased it. The word that would not offend anybody.
There's plenty of
And
other words that we can use to describe it, but
of course,
this is a family show.
there are all privacy professionals or business professionals. So, and then maybe to keep that humor going, how would you make or how can you make privacy exciting, if you may?
If you, it's a very good question. I think you can. I think you can. The one thing that always excited me about doing this job was the opportunity to bring it to life for other people. So to bring it to life for an organization. And I
Mm-hmm.
think making it exciting is probably a challenge, maybe a challenge too
Yeah.
far, but you can certainly make it interesting. You
Right.
can certainly make it engaging.
Yeah.
You can certainly bring businesses on board by demonstrating the benefits, removing or changing that mindset from it being compliance, compliance,
Right.
compliance to the business benefits, customer trust, engagement, and using the regulation to communicate better with your customers and better understand your customers. And I think if you can encourage businesses to do that, you can certainly make it more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I find it exciting, but then
Yeah. I think
what do you do?
you say it rightly. It may not be exciting, but we can at least simplify it, make it engaging, and make it interesting and relevant for people so that they're at least paying attention and listening to it rather than just a compliance aspect of it.
It would be good if people did pay attention. That would be
Yeah,
a start.
right. So I think let's talk about the EU representative part of the requirement because that's something key. And there's a lot of discussion also if Brexit would happen and what will happen. So maybe let's start with what is an EU representative in terms of GDPR? And I know you are quite an expert on that topic as well. So let's deep dive into that. So what's an EU representative?
So it's something that we've talked about um, a lot in the past, and as you say, it's part of the regulation that exists, but people never really took any interest in until Brexit came along. So
Yeah.
an EU representative is essentially what it says on the tin. It's a representative of the data controller that is based within the EU.
Mm-hmm.
So this was around before the GDPR. It was around back in the original directive, and then obviously it's been included in. And essentially, what it means is that if an organisation is operating outside of the EU
Mm-hmm.
but is processing personal data of individuals that are within the EU,
Mm-hmm.
then they should either have an office or an establishment there, so
Mm-hmm.
within Europe, or they should have a representative, so an individual or an organisation that resides within the European Union that can essentially be the representative of the organisation. So, in the same way that companies have sales reps, and they may send their EMEA sales rep out to do their sales, that same company should have a representative for the GDPR compliance of their organization.
Sure. And I think it's more, okay, for UK, we don't know how the Brexit will shape up, but it's more relevant for the non-EU, non-European companies like the US, Canada, China, India, those kind of companies who sometimes tend to operate more on a offshore basis and provide services.
Exactly. And that's why you've seen, or there's been such a fundamental shift in the way that US tech organizations operate. And so many of them started to headquarter over in Dublin, in Ireland, because it allows them to have a position in the EU market. It allows them to have a position with an EU-based regulator, so the Information Commissioner in Ireland. And then that becomes their focal point. So that's where all of their activities are driven from. That's where all of their regulatory activity is driven from. So it's the reason it became sort of interesting, and the reason people started to talk about it more, was because if Brexit ever happens, then we would essentially become a third country. So there is an argument that an organisation based in the UK, if they are processing large volumes of personal data from individuals inside the EU, then they're going to need a representative to remain within the EU if they only have a UK base.
Right. And if I get it right, and as far as I know, it does not have to be a person from the company. It can also be an outsourced position and does not have to be full-time.
That's exactly correct. So one of the things that came out when the GDPR came out was, obviously, with all the software and the solutions that people created, people also stood up representative companies, so EU rep companies, and those companies are there specifically to act as the EU representative for a country outside of Europe. So you don't have to employ somebody, you don't have to set up an office in Europe, you don't have to have a specific individual. You can outsource it in the same way that you can outsource your data protection officer. You can outsource your EU representative, but it has to obviously be to an organization that is based within Europe.
So you mentioned that it's like we outsource DPO sometimes. So is it that it's the same as DPO? Because, okay, while we know it, but the audiences, some of them may not be very clear on it. Is it the same as DPO or different? An EU rep, or do you need both? One, how does it work?
So the two roles are completely different. They're completely separate roles. The role of an EU representative is, as we've said, to literally be a representative of the organisation. So you are a contacted organisation or a contacted individual that is designated in writing. You are there for the regulator to contact. You are there to field queries from individuals. You are there to be the face of the company, essentially. The DPO role is a role of independence. It's a role of oversight. The DPO is there to protect the rights and freedoms of the individual. But the key difference is that the DPO cannot be instructed by the organisation to be able to carry out their tasks. They have to be completely independent. Whereas the EU representative is essentially, a third arm, if you like. So they are fully under control of the controller. They are instructed by the controller, and they are carrying out those tasks. So just because you need an EU rep doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a DPO. But if you're processing large volumes of personal data, then you may well need a DPO. But the two roles cannot be done by the same person or by the same organisation. Now, there has been some guidance from the European Data Protection Board around this. And they've also made it clear that while you can use outsourced organisations, you shouldn't use the same company to do the rep and DPO, because there's obviously a risk of conflict of interest.
Yeah, I think it is, because As you rightly say, the EU rep would represent you, so you will guide him, tell him what to do, while a DPO, you cannot tell him. He or she advises you. So you cannot ask the same company on one hand to advise you and on one hand to represent you. It would be funny though.
I think you're more likely to get yourself in trouble doing that. But yeah, it's exactly right. The role has to be independent, so you can't be instructed, and those two just don't marry up at all.
True. And are there clear requirements, as you say, in the EDPB guidelines? There is guidance on EU representative requirements. Would you like to share a few?
So the guidance is relatively vague in terms of what the representative or who the representative needs to be. It can be anyone. It's not the same as where the DPO, so you have to have a certain skill set, you have to have a certain level of knowledge, you have to be embedded in the organization in a certain fashion. The requirements are very simple. They have to be obviously based within the EU. They have to be designated in writing. They have to be contactable. And then there are best practices. So best practice is that you base your representative in the country or the location where you carry out the majority of your processing. So that's intended to stop people from saying, I don't know, let's say you do most of your processing in Germany, where you know the regulator takes more interest and takes much stricter action. So you think, oh, I'll put my representative in Ireland, but I only process 10 people's personal data in Ireland. It's not to say that you can't do that, but obviously best practice is that you should put them in Germany regardless. But you can place them anywhere as long as they're within Europe. The other guidance is that they should be able to speak the native language of the individuals whose personal data you're processing. So some of the more established EU representative outsource companies are actually based in Brussels, so obviously they have access to much more people with multilingual skills. So it's much easier for them to be able to furnish and cover a company. And again, the representative doesn't have to be a single person. It can be an entity, and that entity can be supported by any number of people that sit beneath it.
But you need an EU representative, not a representative per country.
You just need one EU representative. You don't need one in each country that you're operating. You need just one rep in one country, as long as that country is obviously within Europe.
Yeah, and so far that also applies to UK, but we don't know what happens with Brexit. But do you have any indications or any perspective on what are the options or theoretical kind of this can happen, that can happen in Brexit scenario? Or
there are numerous potential options that people talk about. The biggest challenge that the UK has is that we're very unlikely to get an adequacy decision from the EU. We're very unlikely to be seen as having the level of governance and control that is required to have an adequacy decision, because we have surveillance issues and a number of other things. So we're not likely going to pass in that respect. So we will become a third country. There is going to be a lead time to this, of course. So I think we officially exit at the end of December, I believe.
For now.
For now. But obviously with what's going on, nobody really seems to be talking about Brexit. But we understand that it's still moving ahead. So we really don't know.
We don't know.
We really don't know.
Yeah, but I think it, from a layman's perspective, it would be really strange, and also from a privacy professional's perspective, it would be really strange. On one day, you consider a country to be adequate just because something changes jurisdiction-wise, and tomorrow then you say, no, it's a third country. It's very, very strange, to say the least. But we will see what happens.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. And I agree. We've applied the GDPR in the fashion in which it was intended.
Yeah.
We have the UK Data Protection Act, which takes the things that it needs to take from the regulation and implements
Exactly.
those. We have the applied GDPR. I think we're quite good as a country at data protection.
I think so.
But unfortunately, our departure from the EU creates its own political issues, and this is where we end up.
Yeah, and I think it was strange also that the ICO was very prompt, I think almost more than a year ago, as soon as they heard of or kind of Brexit was being talked of, saying, we will offer adequacy to EU. So it was kind of expected to be a reciprocal gesture, but it hasn't happened. So we'll see how it happens. But it sounds strange. One day you are adequate, and next day, because something changes, everything is same. Nothing changed in adequacy, but it's not adequate. We'll see.
Yeah. No,
So,
it's a shame.
yeah, we were talking about this EU rep. I mean, that's easier to talk than Brexit. So let's continue that one. So, from the way I understand, and help me if you see the same way, this EU representative will represent your company. So I expect that there needs to be some sort of a cultural alignment, or you need to check out the person, the company, if they are having your same style of or transparency obligation, or how much. So what would you advise to a company in terms of kind of what should they look at if they are looking for nominating an EU representative, and also maybe if there are any cultural aspects that they should consider. Of course, if you are in US or Canada and then you are doing it in Europe, the cultures are very different, but still here we are talking of corporate culture and not the social culture.
So, for me, there is no difference to appointing a representative for the regulation, in the same vein that you'd appoint a sales representative, or the same way that you'd appoint a VP for marketing in Europe. If you're a US-based organization, you need to be looking for organizations or individuals that meet your cultural desires and meet your approach, that communicate in the way that you want your customers to be communicated to. You need to make sure that they're a viable organization. Are they big enough? Can they handle the queries that you're going to get? And then you also need to decide what it is that you actually want them to do, because being a representative just means that they're contactable. So at the baseline, there are organizations that have set up PO boxes in foreign countries or in European countries, and you put that on your privacy notice, and the correspondence goes to that PO box, and they pick it up and forward it to you, and then you deal with it or create your response and then pass it back through, and that's it. There are other services where people will take that correspondence, they will deal with it, they will communicate with the customer back on your behalf, and they will take care of it, and then you may never see that piece of correspondence until you get your monthly report or your quarterly report or something complained. So you really need to decide what it is that you want your representative to do for you, and then make sure that they're aligned to your business, to your cultural approach, to your standpoint. How do you deal with complaints? How do you deal with concerns? And make sure that fit is there, because you don't want it to appear like it's disjointed, like your organization is not dealing with something in the way that your customers would have expected it to do.
Exactly. I think that's the point I wanted to bring forward. The EU representative requirements, as you rightly said, are not so specific. You can choose the EU representative to be your post box, or also talking to your clients and data subjects, or even responding on your behalf. So you need to really define what you want him to or her to do, and how much. And if he or she is replying on to data subjects, do you want them to do it versus you want them to contact you? Of course, there are implications in terms of time spent, cost, and all those things, but you need to be really clear and define yourself. What are you looking for?
Yeah, exactly that.
Indeed. And is there the aspect of culture alignment in these roles? Because there are companies who would expect to be very specific in their communication with clients, and there are companies who are tend to be just standardized, no touch of personalization. But because if you need a little bit of personalization, then it's not just another data subject. You need to know what's the relationship you have with that data subject, and then you maybe need to go back to the company and check. So do you define parameters, or should the company define parameters like that as well?
Without a doubt. So depending on the level of engagement that you're expecting from your representative, if you want them to field queries and deal with the customer directly and understand the customer journey and where the customer has been on and what's caused the issue or what's caused the complaint, then you need to be prepared to give that organization access to your systems, to your CRM, potentially to your email system. So you have to make sure that they align to what you do. So if you're looking at healthcare, for instance, as a good example, and you're looking at your organization's got ISO 27001, it's got ISO 9001, you're dealing with sensitive medical records, then does the organization that you appoint to be your EU representative have the same level of risk appetite? Does it have the same level of risk understanding? Does it understand those regulations? Does it understand the outside of the GDPR? Because while the GDPR is about protecting individual rights and processing personal data, it's also about security, and it's about control, and it's about having effective accountability. So does the organization that you're going to partner with have that same cultural understanding that your organization has? Does it get that risk-based culture? Does it understand the other standards that you need to have it applied to? Are you going to have them or look to add them to your 27001 certification? Are they going to be within your scope if you're going to give them access to your CRM, if you're going to give them access to your email system? So there is stuff that needs to be thought about.
Indeed, and I think it's not as simple as saying I want a EU rep or not. It's also about what do I want him or her to do and how much, because there are various ways of getting to it. You may want them to reply, but you may want them to consult you, or you may want to give them access to your system. So all those options are there, but you have to really make choice. What are you exactly looking for? And that decides who you need and how much of effort or time they will need to spend. And again, the number of queries you may get.
Yeah, exactly right.
Good. And do you, in your view, see some sort of a governance in this relationship between EU rep and the company? Or what's your view on that? Is it formal? Is it informal? Is it mixed, hybrid?
So I think depending on the size of the organization that you appoint and decide, and depending on the size of your organization, will depend on whose terms of conditions that you're working from. Obviously, having a clearly defined contract in place is going to be incredibly important. You need to be pointing out what you want them to do, how, when, what SLAs are you going to have in place, and obviously what recourse are you going to have should those things go awry. And I think that guidance is not going to come from anywhere in particular.
No.
It's not going to come from the EDPB. It's not going to come from the regulators. That's for your organisation and for your legal teams and your lawyers to work out how best to protect your organisation and how best to protect the information or lack of information that you intend to share. But yeah, it's going to vary massively depending on what you want to do and the nature of your organisation.
Yeah, but I think very well put. It's the contract, it's the roles and responsibilities, it's about the service level agreements, and it's also about the interactions you want to have. Do you want a monthly? Do you want a quarterly? And also, while you will structure a monthly or a quarterly, you may say, if you get a data subject request, you want, or data subject complaint, you want it to be tackled through us. You need to inform before you reply. But those are decisions to be made. I mean, of course, DSAR, it's logical that you need to provide information so that the person would contact you. But complaints, sometimes you tend to be more quick. What do you want?
Yeah, and it may be that you're an e-commerce site, and the complaint is literally where's my item, or why are you marketing to me, and the response might be quick and easy. It might be that you're a social media company that doesn't yet have that resource to have a place in the UK, but you look at before TikTok there was musicology, something like that. It was one that my daughter was talking about.
TikTok?
But again, it was so before the app TikTok there was another one, and it was a similar sort of thing. It was about musically something.
Musically,
like that.
That's the one, probably.
But it was obviously based in China, so it's a Chinese developed app that was consuming huge amounts of personal information. So if somebody puts a subject access request into that, then your representative needs to be able to field that query, deal with it, get in contact with your DPO, or pass that request to you effectively and in a timely fashion, so that you can deal with it and get the response back. The challenge with all of these things is once you get outside of the EU and outside of the governance of the EU, how do you police it at all?
Yeah.
How do you enforce an overseas contract? How do you get the regulator to enforce against an EU rep when, in actual fact, the regulation states that just because you've appointed an EU rep, the legalities of the regulation and the requirements of the regulation remain with you as the controller. You're not passing that over to the EU rep. It's still your responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's very important. You are remaining accountable, but you are asking somebody to represent yourself. So be aware that whatever the person does, end of the day, you are going to be held accountable. It's not the EU rep who would be fined, it's you or your company who would eventually be penalized, fined, questioned, or whatever.
That's exactly it.
Good. But you're talking about TikTok. I think TikTok is Chinese still, if I remember well.
I think TikTok is. It was the Musical.ly one before, but so TikTok's a prime example. The speed with which an application from outside of Europe can gain huge amounts of information, with inside Europe. So it doesn't necessarily apply to the majority of organisations, but the companies that it does apply to, it can become an issue pretty quick.
Good. So while our intention was to focus on the EU representative requirement, I'm pretty sure, and I know for sure that you can provide services for other things. So if people want to get in touch with you, people want to find you or contact you, what would be the best way to contact you?
So the first thing to point out is that we don't offer an EU representative service.
That's a good one. We talk about EU representative and then we say, I don't offer EU representative. So next time I need to get somebody who also is EU representative.
I can help you find somebody, but it's always been something. It's always just been a topic to me that I just don't think enough people talk about, which is why it generally becomes one. In terms of what we do, obviously we do offer outsourced DPO service. We offer outright consultancy, so just data protection consultancy. And we also offer information security consultancy and support services and penetration testing, so CREST accredited penetration testing. You can find us on our website, which is www.istormsolutions.co.uk. You can obviously find me on LinkedIn, and we also have a YouTube channel called the Data Protection Diaries, and on there we post just informational videos, guidance, blogs, vlogs, and a whole manner of other things just from in and around the data protection world, things that we've picked up in the news, things that we find interesting, hints, tips, guidance. So
So maybe to clarify to our audiences, I chose you to share EU representative requirements because I did not want somebody who provides EU representative requirements to be so biased and start selling that. So you and me can have a chat on that in a more neutral, more independent way than somebody trying to sell. No, you need to hire us as an EU representatives. So it will be very strange to stay neutral in that. So it was really nice having you on a dedicated deep dive into a subject. What would be your one final message to the audiences?
If you're enjoying this kind of content, if you're enjoying the world of data protection and you're struggling to get traction in your business, then use some of that enthusiasm. We live in an unfortunate time in the one sense where the world is going through unprecedented change, but we also live in a time where, because of that, information is becoming so much more freely available. You're getting the opportunity to do these kind of podcasts, you're getting the opportunity to talk to more people, share this kind of content, talk about it, and hopefully together we can affect a cultural change, and people can realize that data protection is not boring, it's not annoying, and it's not just about compliance. It's about so much more. And I think if we can just try and change that mindset just a little bit, then the world might just be a better place.
Sure. So thank you so much. It was great having you here. And thanks for your time, Richard. So ladies and gentlemen, this was Richard Merrygold from iStorm Solutions, UK.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you like this effort. Please do click like, comment and share. It is okay if you did not like it. Please still do make a comment and share with us what we can improve. If you have suggestions, ideas for guests, or you want to have your question answered, please email me. My email is info@punitbhatia.com. You can also share this with others, and if you do so while tagging me in, I will personally thank and acknowledge your contribution in coming episodes. Thanks once more and look forward to seeing you back. Till then, stay safe, stay blessed and stay happy.